We got sheep, I think at the fall, at the end of that summer.
Which was probably our biggest mistake.
The processors had all been jam-packed because of COVID. So we had to start with planning 18 months ahead of time for a farm that we had never done. And then we got into for farming that we'd never done.
We would have been profitable if we hadn't dumped all of our profits back into growing further.
That allowed us to also, it forced us to have to be very strategic and grow as big, as quickly as we possibly could.
We settled on this. This is our third design. You can see our chicken tractors, the first two over there.
Cattle panel kind.
And we've had problems. They're heavy and they break. We wanted to get away from wood. So, we work really hard to try to build the relationship with the customer, and then once you have that customer, they'll often buy whatever you have.
All right, so we are at Old Way Farm. You're Stephanie and John.
Yep.
And you guys are just kind of doing like sheep, chicken, pig thing.
Correct.
On your farm, regeneratively moving them around and stuff. Oh, you said you haven't been doing this very long. How long have you been doing this?
This is our third full season.
Yeah, so we've been here for 2.5 years.
Okay, So what brought you here?
The long version or the short version?
Let's go the long version, we can edit it out.
It started with, I had a bunch of health problems and a lot of gut issues, things like that.
Okay.
And I started seeing a doctor who was like, hey, you might want to try to change how you're eating. And we always joke that we started eating in ways that we used to make fun of.
Okay.
Like organic foods, local foods. We didn't think there was there was no difference between anything. And then we started doing it and I started feeling better. So that got us interested in where our food was coming from, how it was being raised, what the differences were, and we started kind of opened up this whole new world that I brushed off at least, and didn't really know anything about. So 2 years later, I guess we did that for about 2 years, and we had just renovated and moved into a house that we thought was going to be our forever family house, and I got really antsy at my job. And started saying, I want to do something different. What could it be? And I was having a classic midlife crisis. I was 40. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to do something different, now's the time to do it. And I started thinking, what else might I want to do? Do I want to go back to school for something? Do I want to keep being in a corporate job? Do I want to switch? And I started looking at this type of farming, and I was like, I think that's an actual business model that we could support ourselves on, and it's something that we believed in. We started looking more and more at it, and then COVID hit, and it was a couple months after lockdown that where I was like, I think I want to move to a farm.
Okay.
And my wife, who
So my side of the story is a little different.
Yeah.
So I, of course, was with John on the whole clean eating journey, and quickly had buy-in with him on that too once we started seeing him do better. But I had really poured a lot into our renovated house, and that was a big deal for me. And so 2 weeks before we moved in, I was standing and looking at the kitchen, and I really felt like the Lord at our renovated house, looking at this gorgeous work of art, and I really felt like the Lord had put on my heart that this was not our home. It belonged to another family, and I needed to be ready for what was coming. I told John that, and he thought I was insane.
Yeah,
he was like, we're staying here forever.
Totally nuts. We only been in the house for 4 months at that point after being renovated.
Oh my gosh.
2 months later, he said, I think I want to become a farmer. And so I was like, well, that's not what I ever saw in the future, but I was prepared to kind of walk in faith and trust. And so we started moving forward. In the meantime, we got pregnant with our third child while we prepared the house for sale. And when we moved out here, he was about 6 months old. So that was our beginning.
Yeah, and there's a lot, there was a lot of just providential things that happened during that time. COVID was there, so we had a little bit more time to kind of think through and actually plan and do some research ahead of time to what we were getting into. I don't know if you know J&L Green Farm up in Shenandoah.
We're going there here in a couple weeks.
So that fall I went to their what is it called?
I call it the Pig Farm School.
The Pig Farm School, but it's like their farrow to finish and marketing school.
Yeah.
And I went there. I was like, okay, I kind of see. It was like the first time I've been on a real farm, probably in my whole life, outside of our petting zoo that's here in Richmond. And I was like, okay, I think we get some context. I think we can figure this out. And I met a guy there who was actually on the other end of our county, a guy named Dennis at Bees Knees Farm. And I was talking with him and I was like, hey, do you need some help sometime? And so he invited me out about a month later to help him process turkeys. So that was their first year doing turkeys at Thanksgiving. And the next year I came out and processed chickens with them every weekend. I started working with him. He taught me a lot. I got to get on, and they did a grass-fed dairy, goat dairy, and then they did chicken and pork and turkeys as well. They had just started doing turkeys. And I don't know if it was the year after that, Dennis and I swapped, like once we moved out here, we swapped and ended up swapped labor every other Wednesdays.
Okay.
So I go to his farm and basically I go to his farm, he teach me a bunch of stuff and he come over here and show me how to do it. I mean, it's more or less, everything from,
Major.
serious mentorship.
It was such a blessing.
And even that, the other things, during that whole time while we were looking for land, and we had some requirements of, we wanted to be within an hour of Richmond where our community had been, but also for a good sales channels. We found this place after being under contract at another place and having it fall through. And as we left after looking at it, we realized that next door was a couple that do a farmstead, smaller scale. But I had met them and worked with them. They know Dennis, and we had processed chickens together a couple times. And
they've been amazing friends, amazing mentors too. They've helped us in a pinch many times.
Yeah.
They came out in the winter. This last December when we had 2 pigs that wouldn't go into a trailer while it was snowing, and they came out at 7:30 in the evening in the pitch dark and helped us load them in. Just things like that we've been really blessed with. So anyways, that's kind of how all the background. Then we found this place, we put an offer in, quickly learned things we never knew, like what happens when you don't have water out of your well the 3 days after you move in.
So we should say we're city people.
Yeah.
We grew up in the suburbs. We loved the city. We got married living in the city.
Yeah.
So we had zero country experience.
Yeah.
When we came out here. So we had no water for 4 days when we moved out here, and because we didn't understand. Well, there were a lot of things messed up, and there were a lot of things we didn't understand about all of the well system. But so my daughter and I got a whole bunch of tubs, and we were outside of the garage. The garage still had water. We were able to fill up the tubs with water and wash our dishes that way.
Yeah.
So that in a nutshell is how we kind of got here. And we started that first year. The first year was small, so I always say it's the year I learned how not to kill my animals. So we did 10 pigs, and the plan was to do 300 chickens, and that was it, and with some laying hens. We got in with an online farmer's market, and they were like, oh, we'll buy as much chicken as you want. So we went from 300 chickens to 500 to 800 chickens 2 weeks into the summer, trying to figure out how to do that and build more chicken tractors and all the stuff that goes with it.
Yeah.
And so it was that was a hard year. It was a lot of learning, but we kind of figured stuff out. And was that the same year we decided to get sheep, or did we wait till the next year?
We got sheep, I think, at the fall, at the end of that summer.
Which was probably our biggest mistake.
Okay.
It's too much too fast, and didn't understand enough about sheep. I love our sheep. We have had a friend who has a big flock of black belly Barbados sheep.
Okay.
He's like, oh yeah, we had learned about hair sheep and all the benefits, the parasite resistance and everything. He's like, they're great. They're not skittish at all. They're super tame. And he had 150 of them. So we bought 5 ewes and five wethers that we were just going to grow out to eat, to turn into meat for us. We unloaded them, opened up the gate of the trailer. We had a little paddock set up.
They did.
They did
more than that.
They immediately jumped over the netting we had, and were gone.
Within about
they were
30
all
seconds.
over our neighbor's farm. We didn't know what to do. So they came out. They helped us kind of corral them back in. For the first 2 weeks, every day, they left. And
They just left the farm.
They just left. They would get out. And there ended up being one that was a particular troublemaker, but they just kept leaving. We didn't really understand why. The grass was too tall. There's a lot of stuff that, in hindsight, we've learned. But they're also just super skittish sheep.
Yeah.
So we've gotten some other ones. We've been crossing them with Katahdins, which have been much calmer
Okay.
in general. And they put some size on them, so it's a much better.
So you started with chicken.
Yeah.
That kind of blew up. And then you got sheep. Why did you get sheep though? Was it just because your friend
No,
mentioned
it was, so when we moved out here, these fields hadn't had anything done to them in years. Like they were not mowed, they weren't row cropped. They had been row cropped. This is part of a large farm that got subdivided in the 90s. And the only field left that is still row cropped is there's like 10 acres over there. The last owners here had stopped doing anything with it for probably about 5 years. So we had, there were saplings above my head when we moved out here, like all throughout the field.
Okay, so it really tried to reforest itself.
And it was also full of broom sedge.
Yeah, it was junk grass. Really? So we were like, well, let's get something that to help us more quickly regenerate, because we weren't doing enough chickens or enough pigs to hit everything.
Right.
So it's like, well, let's start getting a ruminant on here that we can rotate around and really help the soil that will also eat junkier stuff.
Right.
You know, and I don't like goats. No offense against goats. I just don't really like goats. That's where we ended up with sheep. We're like, oh, they're small, like they're manageable, and I've since learned that they are so difficult.
And also in the economics of growing the flock, we wanted to get an early start, knowing that by the time that we wanted a large flock, we would be grateful for having started early. That might still play out in the next couple of years.
So you tried to put some foresight into it. So you were trying to better the soil. You got them. How long have you had them now?
We've bred them. They've lambed twice. So this will be their third year on the farm.
Okay.
This will be the third summer.
Fall.
The third summer on the fall.
Okay, so you got them almost immediately then. So you really jumped in. Like you bought the place and got
we've been here about 10 months before we got these guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if we'd said this part of our story, but when we decided to start farming, we started also saving really, really aggressively, because we knew I had stopped working when our oldest was just 10 months old. And so I'm a nurse. We knew I had the ability to go back part-time if needed, but we also knew that with 3 young children, there was no way we could have the energy to maintain a job and maintain the farm. We decided to save as aggressively as we could, and also kind of start practicing what life would be like on a different income.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point.
So it helped quite a bit. So he only continued working. We moved out here in November. He continued working through April, and then he stopped, and we've
been living off savings since.
Yes. So very carefully.
Yeah.
That allowed us to also, it forced us to have to be very strategic and grow as big, as quickly as we possibly could.
Yeah.
It's also allowed us to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been, the word profitable kind of, we would have been profitable if we hadn't dumped all of our profits back into growing further. So
I mean, that's any farm,
yeah,
right? Like, and really, that's a lot of businesses. I think people, on the homestead side or like on the small farm side, I think that they get too wrapped up in what an income looks like based on a balance sheet or a tax return or your own cash, your own pocketbook. And when you're putting the money that you've made back into the farm, you're just reinvesting in yourself. It's not cash in your pocket. But it's cash. My dad always said that our herd of cattle out in our field was our savings account.
Right.
That he could turn those in at any time, and that was just like a savings account. So yeah, with you saying, our profits, we're dumping it back in, but you're able to strategically grow to keep your income. I think that's very smart.
So we've gone from, that first year was 10 pigs, 800 chickens, that was it. And then the sheep that we bought, I forget, we took 5 of them in that fall maybe.
Okay, so that's where I was going with that. You are selling lamb.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we've been bringing, so what we've been doing as we're growing the flock is bringing in lambs from some other farms, mainly the farm we bought our initial ewes from. And we'll bring those in and finish growing them out so we have enough while the flock is growing.
Okay.
And avoiding the winter hay season, anything like that.
Yeah.
So we're getting ready to hopefully bring some in the next few weeks, now that we've got grass going again in the spring. And then we'll take him in to the butcher in September. And so we just tell people we have lamb seasonally. We don't have enough to last year round.
Yeah.
But then we end up going from that small number to, like, this year we're going to raise, I think, 80 pigs and 3,500 chickens and 400 turkeys, and we'll probably finish 15 to 20 lambs. But going from 10, we went from 10 pigs to I think 20 the next year to 30, and cash flow wise, like, it's just amazing. It's like, I got to buy the piglet, and you're feeding that piglet for 6 months, and you're like, I can't pay myself yet, because if I want to grow, it's like you can do one or the other, or you can go slowly. And we wanted to get to a point where we were raising enough that if we did need to start taking money out, we actually could support ourselves. So this year is the transition. So we're starting to pay ourselves. We're at a level that we should be able to subsist at a minimum off of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we can move into a slower growth phase so that we're not having to dump everything in.
So you can be a little bit more stable in your growth.
Yeah.
To have your cash behind.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
And we did it in a way that everyone says don't do more than one. I mean, I've had so many people don't do more than one enterprise at a time. I just didn't think we could get our chickens big enough fast enough. Like, how many chickens do I need to raise in a year if that's our only enterprise?
And chicken processing is so tedious.
Yeah.
You know,
So you guys are processing yourselves.
we
Yes.
harvest on farm, we do.
Yeah.
But that was another huge blessing. We quickly were connected with people. Some were teens in the community that we know who were more than happy to come out and harvest with us. And then we've connected with some other adults who just wanted to learn homesteading and have become really faithful. And then a couple of our dear friends now who come out and help every single time that we're processing chickens. And this year we have, I think, 14 processing dates. And then the next day is cut up. So there's 28 days that we have to hire a crew of 5 to 6 people to help with it.
Yeah. So people told you not to go into one enterprise at a time. And
No, they told us to go into one.
to go
to go
to
into one
only
at a
do
time.
one enterprise at a time, one species at a time. And through our travels, I am seeing a big divide on people who either do it all or do one. So tell me a little bit about how that went down. Like, people are telling you to do one thing. You are thinking maybe I should do another. Explain that.
Well, I will actually say I think most people that told me you should only do one was after I'd already decided and jumped in.
Okay.
But my plan from the beginning had been how do we get to a place where we can be sustainable with enough revenue? And I was like, okay, if we need to do 100 pigs by themselves, or maybe 150 pigs a year if we wanted to do direct sales to have enough money to probably live off of, and we need at least 10,000 chickens. So I was like, that's, to me, didn't seem attainable in
huge.
like a 3-year period to grow that fast. Like, how? Yeah, I think we could get some customers and even some repeat customers, but that's really big. But if someone's already coming to buy chicken, they'll probably buy pork. And the cash flow in those two species, particularly the cash flow, the chicken's really good. You're talking 6 weeks, 8 weeks till the time you get your payback. I think we were looking at it and saying, well, how do we make this work? And are we going to go, we're going to sell at farmers markets? How are we going to get, what are our sales channels going to be? And especially if you're going to a farmers market, why wouldn't you have more? Because if someone's coming up to you to buy pigs or buy pork, it's not hard to sell them chicken at the same time.
Right.
And vice versa. And if you're building the relationships with people, they'll want to buy as much as they can from you.
Right.
So, we work really hard to try to build the relationship with the customer. And then once you have that customer, they'll often buy whatever you have.
Yep.
And the idea of, I like the idea of a one-stop shop to make things easy. I mean, that's really what we want to do, is kind of the regenerative side, the animal quality of life side is really important to us. But for our customers, they want to know they're getting good food. How conveniently can they get it?
Yeah.
So,
because they're already going to the grocery store. They already have the convenience of the grocery store, which small farmers are working really hard to push against. Yeah, being a one-stop shop makes sense, but also I think as people who didn't grow up farming, like you said, you had no intention of being on a farm ever. If you get sheep and you're like, I freaking hate sheep, I don't want sheep anymore, at least then you're not losing your whole business.
Yeah.
To really focus on your farm business, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's been successful for you.
Yeah, and I think, clearly we were influenced. Polyface is in Virginia.
Right.
We went to J&L Green's farm. and
Right.
They
He's
do
not far from
they
here.
do everything. And then when we came back to Bee's Knees Farm, they don't do everything. They didn't do beef, but they had a dairy, and then they had chicken, turkey, and pork, and we're making it work. So, it seemed like it was feasible. And and also the other part that's maybe a little bit more unique in Virginia, if you want to do poultry, right now there's only one USDA approved poultry processor on small scale. And they're 2.5, 3 hours away from us.
We're seeing that throughout a lot of states.
and they charge, like, if you want a chicken, whole chicken cut up, last time I looked at their prices, it's like $12 a chicken to get that done. And then by the time you drive back, you buy the crates, like, it's a huge expense. So
And a lot of time.
Yeah.
So then you're also limited, like, how big can I realistically get our chickens here on farm
Right.
before we run into the processing issue, and how much help can I get? And then we're processing every week. So at some point, 10, 20,000 chickens is not really feasible. Maybe 10,000 eventually, but seems a little impractical. Which then leads us to that, you run into that, like, how many can you actually do?
Right.
And can you make enough to live off that?
Yeah. And without completely burning yourself out.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
that's a big part.
By the 10th, 15th, 20th processing date, you're like, I don't want to touch another freaking chicken for the rest of my life.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't want our crew to feel that way either, because
Right,
they are really efficient and they're committed. They care about what we're doing, and we want them to stay that way too.
Right.
They-
Right.
We couldn't do this without them. So
Yeah.
So these are your turkeys.
Yeah.
These are our spring.
Tell me about your tractors here. Are these handmade?
Yep,
You
so
make
we made them. I'm using a design from Dave Shields down in Pasture Life Farm in Florida.
Okay.
So this is more or less his design that we modified a little bit for us.
Okay. And they think they're moving because we're here.
They did just move like an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, so this is all made out of chain link top rail,
Okay.
and we bend it. These are a lot of greenhouse fittings that we're using. And we settled on this. This is our third design. You can see our chicken tractors, the first two over there.
Paddle panel
Yeah.
kind. Okay.
And we've had problems. They're heavy and they break. We wanted to get away from wood. So these ones will theoretically last forever.
How do they move?
So right now we lift up the back, and there's a couple axles on each side, and we just use some tires.
Just like the Siskovich kind
Yeah.
of model, right? Like you just put the tire on and the dolly, Salatin's dolly. I mean, Paul, he taught himself how to weld just making that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't too difficult. So, and then you've got wiggle wire
Yes.
Yes.
in it. Oh, that's nice.
That has been a
Yeah.
game
So we got
changer.
totally away from tarps. So this is silage tarp.
Okay.
This is our second season with these tarps. They have lasted. They're so much better shape.
Do you guys get many winds out here? I mean,
Yes.
it's breezy right now. You do get
Oh,
winds
yes.
right here. Okay.
So yeah, we have had these take off on us. So we use when we know wind is coming, trampoline stakes, and we can just put it right. It's like a U, it's a foot long, and we can just push them in the ground right around the top rail on the bottom. That's around the frame.
yeah.
That's held them in, but we had just staged them and got them ready for the spring a month ago. And we had our biggest windstorm of the year. We had like 60, 70 mile an hour winds out here.
Oh.
One of them ended up in my neighbor's trees.
Wow.
So it was way down there. It's the one that's
like all the way down there.
all the way down there. Yeah.
Wow.
So they can take off. It's
Yeah.
They were empty when that happened.
yes, they were
Okay,
empty.
good
They were
point.
empty.
Good point. No animals.
We had just gotten them all lined up to get ready for animals.
We got the
when that
tarps
happened.
back on them for the spring and
Okay.
everything. So
Wow. So then you take these tarps off and store them.
yes, we have the
Okay.
ability to.
Okay.
We don't always do it.
Okay.
Yeah, they survived. Actually, these ones survived through the winter.
That's it. Well, and I mean, a silage tarp is meant to go
Exactly.
through a lot of weather.
Yeah,
So-
we were finding the regular tarps, you're spending more money on them and they last a season,
Yeah.
even the expensive ones.
Yeah.
So,
Especially in the wind. We could never keep a tarp without holes for a season. I mean, it just never worked. And in the Midwest, tons.
Yeah.
Right.
Tons of
You don't have
wind.
trees breaking it up.
Yeah. So with marketing, you guys, were you in I know you said you were a nurse. John, what did you do?
engineering. So I
Engineering,
was a
so-
chemical engineer.
Okay, so like no marketing.
No,
Really whatsoever.
No, I had a commercial role at the end, so I saw more of the business and the finance side, but not, I was not a marketer by any means.
So how have you how have you worked through the fact that you need to market yourself and do all of the work?
It's been a challenge, it stretches us. We're not great at it, and we're learning. We're getting ready to sign up for a marketing class.
Charlotte Smith.
Oh,
Cal
yeah.
marketing.
Retail marketing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've been listening to her podcast.
She's been trying to get me to do it for 2 years, and
I wasn't going to say that.
I was very resistant to it because like the little bits I saw were like things I was like, I think I'm already doing these things. And I was very resistant to it. But we sat through one of her free hour-and-a-half like website sessions, like website marketing. I was like, oh, she has a lot of really good things to say. It's like, it might be worth us doing this.
She's been holding out with her free stuff.
Yeah, so we just decided, actually yesterday, decided we were going to sign up for it.
Okay.
You know, so yeah, marketing's been a challenge, I think. As I said, we got fortunate to get into 2 really good markets right away. That helped. I mean, part of our problem is we haven't had enough product.
Yeah.
We ran out of pork last year. Every year we've gone, you know, first year we did 800 chickens. We did 2,000, 2,200 last year. We still ran out in February. And we're doing 3,500 this year.
We started turning away wholesale customers for chickens in November. And the demand is, we're really, really blessed in terms of what the demand has been.
So marketing hasn't been hard. It's now trying to convert customers from the farmer's market to a regular, like buying on our website and doing our deliveries and our other, you know, drop sites, things like that.
Yeah.
And all that's to create a sustainable life that we can keep doing.
Because like every farmer, we want to get out of farmers markets eventually.
I mean, I do love, like, it is a fun place to connect with the community. And
especially when you're on the farm all week. It's a nice social hour, right?
Well, and for me, that's where I flourish. I love being there with people. I love our customers. I love getting to connect with them. I'd also love to be able to go to some Saturday stuff with the kids.
Yeah, for sure. So we are at your pigs.
Yep.
And it looks like you got some Berks.
Yep. These are purebred Berkshires. They're our favorite. We try to raise them as often as we can. We have had to bring in some Berkshire crosses before, just because we couldn't get these.
So you get piglets?
Yeah.
You don't have sows?
We don't farrow. That was something else I learned early on talking to a couple people. Don't farrow. Like, unless you...
At least right away.
Yeah, I mean, and our friends at Bees Knees did it for a year and a half, and he's like, I either am only going to farrow or I'm not going to do it. And they ended up, they actually ended up selling their farm. We just bought their farm from them like this month, a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they're bought an RV and are going to travel around.
Sound familiar?
This must be something in the water with us farmers just hitching up and going somewhere.
After being tethered to a place.
Yeah. So yeah, there's about half of them seem like they're out here. The rest of them are deeper in the woods.
So you got how many out here?
15 in this group.
Okay.
And we had some in the front we just took to the butcher a week and a half ago. Actually picking them up tomorrow.
So they go, like what you can see of this paddock is probably 7 times.
Yeah, it's about a half-acre paddock, maybe.
Back into the woods.
Somewhere between a quarter and a half-acre paddock.
And they stay there for how long?
About a week.
Okay. Yeah.
Longer when they were smaller.
Right.
And unless they're really tearing it up, we don't usually go much less than a week.
Yeah.
Just because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But so they moved here yesterday, and there was grass everywhere. So they're doing their job. But it's always fun. It's fun to see them now. The first year we had them mostly in the fields, and they tore it up, and we're seeing the benefits of it. But we're also seeing that, you know.
You don't want to do that every year.
We have one field where they haven't been, which is where we have the chickens, because we can move the chicken tractors without all the bumps.
Yeah.
But it's always fun to see them. Like, there's a couple hickory trees in this paddock they hadn't gotten to before, because we've been pushing further and further in as they're kind of tearing it up. And they just sat there all day yesterday. I got a video. They sat there all day yesterday rooting the hickory nuts up around the base of the tree. Yeah, so these guys, some of them will go in next month, and then the other half of them will go in the month after that. And we'll be getting some piglets in about a week. We try to do it, starting last year, we're trying to do it so we always have 2 sets on the farm.
Yeah.
And we're going like every quarter, taking some into the butcher. So especially for the customers that buy the wholes and the halves at a time, that we always have, they're not waiting 6 months to the next time they can get something.
How far away is your processor, your red meat, or your?
So we have one processor who's only an hour and 15 minutes away. And that's been really nice, but they haven't had enough capacity for us. So we've been using one in North Carolina that's 4 hours away as well, which this year I think we're finally not, they're great, but we're finally not gonna have to go back. And then we've just found another guy just got USDA approved last month, and he's about 2 hours away. So we're gonna work with him, see how he does, and maybe be able to get a little more customization, a little more things the way we like it. But we've been happy, and we're fortunate that we do have the one this close, because the next closest one is in Stanton, Virginia, which is about 2.5, 3 hours away through the mountains.
Yeah.
I don't want to haul. I just don't want to haul up in the mountains with
I wouldn't want to either.
Trailer full of pigs and.
It does not sound like fun at all.
No.
No, not even close.
Yeah. I'm sure, I don't know if you all experienced this too when you were farming, but when we started in 2021, the processors had all been jam-packed because of COVID. So we had to start with planning 18 months ahead of time for a farm that we had never done. And then we got into for farming we'd never done, and we got into these really wonderful markets. So the demand was so much bigger than what we had anticipated a year and a half before.
Right.
I think one of them was only 12 months early that we had to.
Yeah, but we.
If it's okay.
Yeah.
I want to hit on that for a second. You were planning for a farm 18 months before you bought it. Like you were scheduling butcher dates before you even had the farm.
We scheduled butcher dates in May of 20 for March of 2021.
May of 2021.
May of 2021 for
March
of 2022 before we had a farm.
Yes.
Okay.
Just shot in the dark.
Wow.
Yes.
You want to talk about gambling on yourself. Let's not say gambling, because gambling I think has a bad connotation anymore. But like you are really taking like a calculated leap of faith.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's very calculated. Wow.
So we didn't have a choice. We were talking to our friends. They're like, oh yeah, you know the butcher they've opened up their dates for next year. Next year? And so it was for the whole. I mean, if you wanted a date between January or December of 2022, you had to let them know before June of 2021.
And how many? You thought you would be taking it?
And what dates?
Yeah.
So it takes 6 months to raise a pig. I think we're going to be on a farm in October or November. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you hadn't even bought the place yet.
No.
And you said the first place you tried to buy the contract fell through.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
So.
But that was, I mean, still, this was way before we had even found that place.
Yeah.
We had just had.
I don't think we hadn't even started looking at houses yet, or land yet, or anything like that. It's been the same, and it's been the same ever since. Unfortunately, I mean that was the biggest gamble, or the biggest risk. Not a risk. I mean, the worst thing you do is you cancel.
Right.
But there was no moving the date. So if we ended up getting animals, if we ended up getting pigs in December, then they weren't going to be ready in March, and we weren't going to be able to get dates at another point in time for that year.
Right.
So we didn't know what we would do at that point. Just keep calling people until someone let us in.
I mean, the number of ways that we were provided for in the midst of all of that, though, and the number of times where it was like, this doesn't look like it's going to work out, and then it did.
Yeah.
Especially in that first year. It was incredible. It was really incredible.
Are you planning on growing any further? Like I feel like once people have this kind of bug, then they start thinking about the homestead side of things, and then there's a dairy cow somewhere in that. Are you guys like planning on adding any extra creatures, or are you just kind of content with where you are and you're gonna?
So the big question has always been beef, because that's I mean, we have so many customers that tell us, and we resell beef from a friend of ours.
Okay.
So we'll buy whole cows at a time and resell. And we've had so many people, oh, do you do half beef? Do you do whole? Can I buy a whole beef from? Like, no, sorry, like we don't do that. So I think if we could do beef, we could easily sell, some number of cows a year, probably easily like 10 cows a year with our current customer base, if not more. But again, it's a big investment. We've just bought stuff to put a perimeter fence up here. I don't know, we're still not really in good enough shape, I don't think, to intensely support beef and the sheep.
My personal opinion is that beef are easier than sheep.
That's what I've heard. And in hindsight, that's what I've heard. The sheep has been good because, like Steph said, the lamb has gotten us into some markets too as a selling point.
It's very unique, I'm sure, even close to a city where uniqueness is kind of common.
Yeah.
But the beef has been the one that we've talked about. We'd like to find more land to lease close by to really do it. And otherwise, I think we'll just try to keep growing with what we have. I think turkey's probably the big one for us to grow this year. Probably, because we did 125 turkeys last year, something like 150 maybe. And we're gonna do 400 or so this year, and that was a big hit. People love ground turkey. Are willing to pay an exorbitant price for it.
Wow.
And it's a lot more work. The turkey we do, it's half breast meat, half dark meat. So it's like, well, I can't sell it for less than the breast meat because that's half of it, and then there's all the extra labor that goes into deboning and grinding. And we sold that very well. And I think turkeys are a much easier animal to raise. They're a lot more fun. They're the best thing for the fields. I mean, I know we haven't talked a lot about the regenerative side, but I can show you right here. Like here,
the dark patch.
These dark patches are where the turkeys roosted. And there's a couple behind you, like right up here. There's another dark patch.
Oh yeah, right up there.
And this is where that's not anything we planted. That is, the pigs came through here and the turkeys came afterwards. And it's like the natural fescue coming up. Pigs, we could still put more pigs on here. There's plenty of room to grow the pigs. And we want to get the sheep up to we're doing like 50 lambs a year.
Okay.
So I don't think next year, but the year after that we'll be around there.
That is what's nice about sheep is, as opposed to cattle, is sheep will give you two.
Yeah,
Two
three sometimes.
Three sometimes, versus a cow's just giving you one.
And the cash flow. I mean, again, looking at starting farming, when I can turn a sheep takes me 6 to 7 months to grow out.
Right.
After it's been born, the lamb. So I can turn that around a lot faster than the beef.
Yeah.
So I think the beef is it's a bigger long-term investment. I want us to be stable before we get into that. So we're not going out and buying, I don't even know what the cows cost, but the cows, the infrastructure, everything else, and then sitting on that for a year, 2 years until the cow is old enough to take in.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. How does that feel from someone who didn't come from the farming background, then to see like the natural processes happening? I mean, growing up in the suburbs, I didn't grow up in the suburbs, so I'm making an assumption, but there's not a lot of green.
No, and what has been sprayed to be green.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Well,
So it's all painted green.
Yeah.
You said like you watch the chickens go through and you're like, wow, that's real grass. How has that really come in for you now being farmers?
I think I don't know. I always think it's just amazing to look at, because growing up, like you said, growing up in the suburbs, to get green grass, you had to aerate in the fall, reseed, dump fertilizer, and then put herbicides in the spring to get the broadleafs down, to get this like meticulously manicured lawn. It had to be watered a certain amount. And you look out here, you're like, well, God created animals to do that. And it's not perfect yet, but I think I get a big sense of satisfaction, especially going into this year where we've really seen the change more than, I keep thinking like, when's it really going to start changing? And this spring has been coming up a lot greener than it has in the past. I'm like, all right, so that's took 3 years to get us here. Like, what's another 3 years going to do? And nothing, we haven't limed the fields. We haven't sprayed the fields with anything. It's just been the animals doing their work and an occasional bush hog.
Yeah.
If it gets out of control. So it's
been amazing to see that that nature really does work this way.
Yeah.
And sort of
the
how did we not know this?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
we're educated people. How did we not know this,
Yeah.
right? But the other thing, I think it's really changed my perception of what I think is beautiful. Like what is a beautiful lawn even? Because I think this is beautiful, and if this was in someone's lawn, it might not be perceived that way.
Right.
That's been really cool for me to see that I'm starting to appreciate the natural so much more. Just the visual natural.
Yeah. I love that. Well, any links, websites, farmers markets, anything like that you guys want to include, we'll put that in the description below. So if anybody wants to find you and they're in the area, that's how they can find you. Thank you both so much for having me out and showing me around. I think what you guys are doing is really cool, but it's more inspiring how you got here, I think. So I love your story. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
it. I am always super inspired by people who don't come from a farming background and just get bit by that bug. It almost always starts out with their health, and then it goes into their taste, and then they're able to really experience the farming journey. Their story is really cool, and how they've been able to really just capitalize and make it a business and make it work for them. I'm really excited to see where they go. And if you're excited to see where we go, by the time you see this video, we're gonna be up in the New England area. So if you know of any farms near Connecticut, New York, or Vermont, send them to our email. We are always looking for cool, fun, awesome, and amazing and inspiring farms and farmers to go see, to go learn from, and then of course to share their story with you. So please send that to our email, and we look forward to where we go next. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful week.